It's happened. The first major data slate for 40k has dropped. The ship's Vox has been a constant stream of information. Goods, bads, unknowns. There is a lot to get into, so real quick, this is YouTube, and if you're interested in tabletop content and are new to the channel, maybe tap that subscribe. I hear the like also helps. And we have our community Discord linked below if you're interested in joining up with other fans of the genre. Hopefully I can filter this information well. Let's get into it. I know many of you are probably wondering about those who are on the top and bottom of the recent meta lists as to what is being done to rein some issues in. We'll get to that. I'll even have chapters set for this if you really need to skip around. For now, we'll look at some core changes to the overall rules of the game. There are some big ones here. First up, devastating wounds are now defined as to when they occur in the combat sequence. There is also a clarification that no saving throws can prevent them. A refinement in wording that could adjust how some shooting and fighting pans out, as all the devastating wounds are triggered at the end of the overall attacking sequence. The next core adjustment involves modifying a stratagem's CP cost. This is actually huge, not just for abilities that reduce the cost, but also ones that increase it. The new system for adjusting ploy costs requires the ability to claim specifics of what can change. If it doesn't, only ploys considered battle tactics can be targeted for either increase or decrease. Listening to my local Necrons complain about the Calidus Assassin restricting their protocol of the Undying Legion ploy will be a thing of the past, but this also limits some prior strategies. No more multiple ensorcelled infusions in a single shooting phase for the Thousand Suns. No more bringing back multiple Custodes every battle round. The ripple effect of this adjustment will be felt throughout the whole game. It also shows that, interestingly, a function that was built into ploys that served no purpose beyond organizing them visually now serves as a more important system. Battle tactic, epic deed, strategic ploy, and war gear now have way more purpose and might even be expanded upon going forward. Fire Overwatch was given a clarification and a new limit. It ensures that the enemy unit being overwatched must be visible to the unit using the ability. Good. Now, Titanic units are no longer allowed to use this stratagem. My Dark Flame Cannon Tyrant might be going back on hiatus. Insane Bravery has been changed. Battle Shock has been treated as a near meaningless mechanic so far. It's too unreliable to focus on as a path to victory. This change will try and help that a little. This ploy can now only be used once per battle, and you can no longer use it to undo a failed check. You must choose to use it before making the roll. This might not seem too big at first glance, and it certainly doesn't fix the Battle Shock general issue, but this is certainly a step in the right direction and will make late game against Battle Shock manipulation teams more dire. Lastly, for the core changes is an adjustment to the Ruins visibility. A big change for Knights. Towering units no longer override the Ruins obscuring rules. Only aircraft are considered an exception to this now. As a consolation prize, towering models don't need to be wholly within the terrain feature to see out of it normally. So, not completely screwed, but this should cut back on the horror Knights teams have wrought on others by overriding a major visibility rule. There weren't a lot of core changes, but all of these I feel are pretty massive when adjusting the structure of the current meta, and this is before we even get to the team changes. Across the board, most of the teams outside of the Adeptus Titanicus have seen a slew of points adjustments, increases and decreases as Games Workshop tries to shepherd us towards less obnoxious rosters. I'll have the Munitorium linked below for version 1.3 if you are curious about these changes. For the most part, I want to focus on the rules changes that might be tied to those point changes as well. So, the Adeptus Custodes. On the point we already made about command point cost adjustment, the Custodes had a ploy changed from battle tactic to epic deed. Unwavering Sentinels, a ploy that allows a unit to gain fights first for the fight phase it is used in. Very powerful and a much needed restriction. Following this, the Custodian Guard, Custodian Wardens, and the Virtus Praetors have their squad sizes adjusted, mostly reductions in the sizes. A decent nerf, as the running meta for many was to run 2 large bricks of Wardens to maximize their full durability and statting. On top of bringing multiple Custodes back, it made these teams very difficult to kill. At smaller scale, they should be easier to handle. Hopefully for Custodes players, this doesn't end up as an overcorrection. Of course, time will tell. The Cults of Mars received some survivability adjustments to their Skitarii Rangers and Vanguard. Both squads have their saves and invulnerables increased by 1, 4+ for the regular save, 5 for the invulnerable. This, alongside much of the points reductions the team received, should allow Mechanicus players to field more with a stronger core unit to hold objectives. Don't necessarily know if this will help much, and the Mechanicus was on the lower end of the 40% win rate. We'll have to see if this little nudge pushes them up the ladder. As well, I wonder if the Ranger buff will make its way to Combat Patrol down the road. Yes. Yes! I've seen the memes, I've heard the cries, tournament podiums filled with space elves, so let's see what happens to factions that take on such high level of power. Ah yes, excellent. So Phantasm now only affects infantry. Pretty big. Having Wraith Knights be able to move 7 inches during an enemy turn might have been a little much. It seems the core focus of the changes, like the Mechanicus, are on points, mostly increases. Support weapons, Wraith Knights, Fire Prisms, and more saw a bit of a points increase. Leading up to this data slate, I was worried that Games Workshop would overcorrect the teams getting 60% win rates. This does not seem to be the case. There should be a little less space elves in the battlefield now, which should help a little as choices will need to be made between lethality and utility. Just not sure how much it will help. The Exaction Squad saw much use when paired with Custodes teams in recent tournaments. 35 points for a 5-man squad is a great way to have a small unit holding backline points. No longer an option. As always with Games Workshop games, abusing strong options is a good way to have that option taken away. The Exaction Squad can now only be full size, and the cost is 35 more than it was. As well, the squad is limited when taking upgraded weapons. Originally, in a full-size squad, they would take a full collection of special weapons. Now they are restricted to the 2 that the small squad would normally have. This feels more like a secondary Custodes nerf. That team, with all of its high-cost units, needed to find a cheap reinforcement utility squad. This adjustment will serve to affect that meta list more than most. I don't know if you peruse Reddit occasionally. The Death Guard subreddit has been pretty active with their dislike of that faction's release date. The sadness around their unit costs, combined with the lack of durability, the only viable path to victory for many being a Mortarion Plague Crawler combo. I think this might help a bit. The Plague Company detachment rule Spread the Sickness has gained a buff. The general reduction in toughness the Death Guard have will be reinforced in every battle by the choice of 1 extra characteristic modifier. Within the Nurgle's Gift range, as it changes turn to turn, the Death Guard will reduce toughness as well as potentially the ballistic skill and weapon skill of enemies by 1, the save characteristic by 1, or the leadership and objective control of a unit by 1, to a minimum of 1. The detachment rule still retains its sticky objective function on top of this. I like this change, as it provides adaptability as well as some stacking effects with unit abilities and enhancements. On top of this, I've seen many Death Guard players losing their minds over the points changes. Drastic reductions across the board. Congratulations. I am jealous of your Hellbrute cost. This doesn't exactly change survivability in ways that many Death Guard fans have been complaining about, so I imagine the Feel No Pain crowd is still fuming. But I think this new identity might serve the poxed forces of Nurgle a bit better. Can't wait for some rematches I should have coming up. A team that was hit with some text fixes to prevent almost hundreds of mortal wounds from happening. They now have some restrictions on their wargear stratagems. Dragonfire, Kraken, and Hellfire rounds will now only affect guns that are considered bolt weapons. They even gave us this easy-to-understand list. Only some minor points adjustments with this team, and within Metawatch, they were firmly around a 51% win rate. I'm not sure about this. I haven't played many Deathwatch players, so I'm unaware if these abilities were abused with other gun types in order to push up their victory chance. Feels more like clarification on some rules fluff. Most people look to the Aeldari as the big bad, but the Genestealer Cult wasn't too far behind them in the last Metawatch list. I guess people don't really focus on the cults, which is exactly what they want. Too bad Games Workshop was paying attention. Points increases across most of the board, on top of a reduction in unit sustainability and a little bit of a buff. The big Genestealer Cult ability allows destroyed units to return through ambush based on a dice roll. Originally, you needed to roll a 4+, and battle line units received a +3 to the roll, so, guaranteed. Endless hordes wearing down their enemies, as it should be. So, sadly now, battle line gets +1, and if it is in the first 2 battle rounds of the game, the roll gets a separate +1. But that roll must be a 5. Less of an endless horde and more of an unstable mob. Consolation prize. The Adolin Jackal Bikers are now able to set up 9 inches from a table edge. Better than the 6 it was. Swings and roundabouts. Falling in line with the changes to stratagem cost adjusting, the Grey Knights had Haloed in Soulfire changed from battle tactic to a strategic ploy. This will limit the pseudo-lone operative function on units arriving from Deep Strike. Odd to nerf a team sitting firmly around 40% on the meta chart, but maybe it is preemptive, as every unit that had its points changed saw a drop. It will be interesting seeing more of these rare Astartes on the field at once. Another of the big winners from the opening of 10th edition. We already saw that Overwatch and Ruins visibility had changed to pull down some of the Titanic and Towering units. So, what else could rein in this force to be reckoned with? First up, the Bondsman ability function is changed. Originally, the Custodes Knights would apply a benefit to an armiger, and in return, receive the benefit itself. Super good. Much better than the 9-inch auras their Chaos adversaries have that don't affect the Knight. Well, guess what? Now Bondsman abilities no longer affect the Custodes Knights that used it. Only armigers will receive the benefits of the buff. On top of this, the Thunderstomp stratagem is now an epic deed. No more free/multi-stomps with the Carnus Rex. As well, the Trophy Claim stratagem and Valiant Last Stand have had their command point costs increased to 2. Should make the team a little more discerning with their command points. Unit points-wise, the team already had a big increase in 1.2. This time around, the Carnus Rex got a little reduction, but the Helverin and Warglaive got a bump up. The Bondsman change, in my opinion, is huge. We'll have to see how the effect resonates in the tournament scene. These kin have a big mountain to climb. Being the new-ish kid on the block means they have limited unit options, and at 35% win rate, those units are struggling. With points drops across the board, players should find some room to field more damage and utility potential. On top of this, the detachment rule was changed. Much of the Votann function is built around their judgment tokens, but these tokens normally only appear as you lose units. Not a payoff most people would be okay with. Originally, the Votann could place 2 judgment tokens on one unit it chooses, no matter the game size. In an effort to help alleviate issues at a larger scale, there are now different levels of judgment tokens, with a boost for the lowest level of play. Incursion-sized games allow the Votann to select 2 units for these tokens, 4 at Strike Force and 6 at Onslaught. Much better for the buffs received from those tokens. Now, maybe we'll see some new unit types added to the Votann roster over time to further round out options. One can dream. The biggest collection of units in the game, so many points changes, so much altered. One big thing changed. Desolation Marines can only come in teams of 5. I've heard tales of tournament play in my wanderings through local stores and small pickup games. It seemed like Desolation Marines were the core choice of all Adeptus Astartes players that were trying to maximize their victory chances. 30 of them, just doing their thing. You may be thinking, the Astartes were sub 45% in the last Metawatch. Why hit their big thing? The issue here is actually something that kind of tricks the Metawatch list. This is a factor that plays into a lot of the wins and loss rates of these lists. The Astartes are undoubtedly one of the biggest teams that are played at tournaments. It's the Games Workshop poster child. So even within the low win rate, Games Workshop may have noticed that the list with much higher victory rates than the overall faction seemed to use these units in bulk, and thus the change. Like many, I am skeptical about the Dataslate, not too sure how much it will change for the problem factions. Games on the scale of 40k tend to be a bit unwieldy when you try and steer them down the right path. Something though that I do like is that I feel the biggest changes are universal. The stratagem CP cost change certainly affects some of the teams that tend to abuse the strategy, but it also affects all the teams in some way, shape, or form, while also limiting the extreme strength of the units that can increase command point costs that their opponents use. Sort of a quick stop to a big meta that was starting to form. And the universal changes to Titanic and Towering units to limit their vision and use of Overwatch should up the difficulty rating of playing these teams and units. Not just with the Knights, but with other teams that have similar functions, like the Wraith Knight. And like I said, the adjustment to when Insane Bravery can be used is a sort of step in the right direction for making Battle Shock a little more useful. Even though my Thousand Suns and Chaos Knights weren't part of the faction-specific adjustments, these changes are still felt, even beyond the points. Which again, if we didn't go over your faction in this, most likely the changes were simply points-based. I know for my Thousand Suns that change had made the leadership and majorly used units a bit more costly. We could talk for a while about these shifts, but I feel those that play them will get a better sense from taking a look at the Munitorium themselves. Again, that will be linked below, along with our community Discord. Join up if you want to talk tabletop games, maybe spark up a conversation on what you're looking to field in this arc of 10th edition. Also, let us know in the comments below if anything from these shifts really stands out to you as something greater that people don't seem to be talking about. A hidden shift that only commanders of specific factions would understand. And as always, likes for the like god and subscribes for the subscribe throne. I am Kimerix, and I'll see you in the next one.